Hello, everyone. I am doing a reading today from the novel Yard Full of Bones by Armand Rosamilia and myself, Jay Wilburn. We're doing this in honor of the sale that we are having currently on this book. Looking at my Amazon page, you can see the Yard Full of Bones there, and the Kindle price is a mere 99 cents. Now you can get the paperback for $16.99, and I prefer reading paperback, so nobody's going to stop you if you decide to do that. But between now and Cyber Monday, which I believe is Monday, November 30th, the book will be 99 cents. Now, if you want to pay us full price, you can wait until after the 30th or buy the paperback version, and we will gladly take it. But if you'd like to have a book at a discount price and then see how much you enjoy Armand Rosamilia and myself working together to tell stories, then this is one that you can get. Now, when I was first reading, I dug through and I pulled up an ARC copy of the novel and was going to read from that. But I can read exactly from the place that you guys can read. So here we are in the preview section of Yard Full of Bones by Armand Rosamilia and Jay Wilburn. We put Armand Rosamilia's name first because that's where it falls alphabetically, and not because it would hurt his feelings if my name was first, just in case anybody was wondering. So about the prologue and about 3 chapters and a little bit of the 4th chapter, I believe, are available in the preview. I'm going to read a little bit of it, and then you can decide if you want to read the rest. And then, of course, you can buy it for 99 cents. And why wouldn't you want to? So let's begin A Yard Full of Bones by Armand Rosamilia and Jay Wilburn. Prologue. His mother had been dead for a week before anyone had bothered to call him. It had been another 2 long days before he'd been able to escape Hollywood and work and the upcoming divorce and fly to Vermont. He'd steered clear of his ancestral home in the woods. The funeral had been attended by a few townsfolk, but who didn't bother to speak with him. They looked at him sideways. So many of them were gone now. He was sure his mother had badmouthed him for leaving her to deal with the property all those years ago. He'd rented a sedan in Montpelier, avoided the upgrade and anything fancy. One of the older suits from the back of his walk-in closet was too tight and had to be let out so he could breathe. A change of clothes in a backpack with his toiletries, and he'd been on a plane. She'd made sure there would be no burial and had her ashes sealed in an urn and a thick metal box. Once, only he could take it with him, under the condition that it would go back to California and her ashes spread in the Pacific Ocean. His mother had never even left Vermont in her long, dark lifetime. Vermont was cold and overcast and reminded him too much of his childhood and the hardships and tragedies, the loss of family member after family member. He could not find the sun. He was now alone, and he needed to break the cycle. Getting rid of her ashes would be the thing to unshackle his family from this curse once and for all, as if it really mattered now that he was the last living member. Being a homosexual meant that the Silverstein name ended with him. Still, an icy finger ran up and down his spine whenever he thought of the house in the woods. It had been years since he'd woken from a nightmare he could definitively trace back to his childhood and the Yard Full of Bones. Ghosts made of shadows that followed a body wherever you went, more prominent as you got older, and more days behind them before you. He decided when he got back to Los Angeles, he'd write again, like he used to do in the old days, before fame and money and Brock became his life, before they were expected to direct for the studios, before it had all gone to absolute shit. Gloria picked him up at the airport. He refused to answer any of her questions. Act like my fucking assistant and only worry about what I want, not what you want, he snapped at her. Give me a bottle of wine and something to write on. She left him in the spacious living room. He needed to get rid of this stifling furniture. Too many ghosts and memories blocked the view of the future. It was the last time he saw her, this loyal woman who'd sided with him during the initial split with Brock because he recognized that the man was out of control. Out of his mind on drugs and drinking heavily like the old days when he could handle and manage it. That and the other thing, maybe the thing that was his real addiction and downfall all along. Mel needed a fresh start, perhaps a move to Vancouver, find an isolated spot and write a novel. He'd always wanted to work on a book instead of a film anyway. Visually, in the reader's mind was where the challenge lied. On screen it was too easy to just watch. He knew it didn't matter where he lived really. Darkness found him everywhere. They came for him hours later as he drooled on the couch, pen in hand and unfinished notes about a haunted ghost novel he'd been thinking of for a future movie. Melvin Silverstein, also known as producer Mel Silver, didn't feel the razors slide across his neck or feel the blood rushing out of his body, too intensely dreaming of the new book and a new beginning he was not allowed to chase. That was his bit. That was not his bit. That was not the part he was called to play. Chapter 1. Brock checked his watch. It had been 6 hours since he'd fallen off the wagon. Of course, it had only been 27 hours since he'd fallen off before this time. He'd been sober for 8 years, since his wedding day when he promised Mel he was done being the party guy. He was done with booze and drugs and one-night stands because he'd found his perfect match. He would have married Mel much sooner if it had been allowed, but the state hadn't been ready and Brock's commitment to sobriety wasn't either. California had just enacted the same-sex marriage law, and since both men were big players in Hollywood, they went to the front line and gotten everything signed and sealed before someone in government decided to fight the ruling, which had eventually happened, of course. They'd been married in a huge ceremony in Napa Valley. The paparazzi had been tipped off by Brock, and pictures of the wedding and the multitude of famous people hit the front cover of every tabloid and magazine for over a year. The couple had worked on many movies together, but maybe 3 that mattered. All box office hits. Mel is producer and Brock is director. The big budget Hollywood comedies. Actors like Will Smith and Tom Cruise had been calling them, looking for work. Brock missed writing all of a sudden. He missed drinking too, but that wasn't sudden. Celebrities in their own right. Decadent parties and jaded conversations with not only the biggest actors and producers in Hollywood, but rich tycoons, heads of foreign countries, senators and governors, and even the head of the family, a crime lord from New Jersey, looking to have a movie filmed based off his horrible script. God knows we weren't above horrible scripts. Hell, we wrote more of the horrible ones we had to deal with. Most of the horrible ones we had to deal with. I miss Mel. Jesus, I miss him so much. The lawyer cleared his throat. Brock looked up from his watch. He could tell by the man's expression and the one Gloria was giving him, it hadn't been the first time trying to get his attention. Brock sat up in his chair and tugged at his tie, which he always did when he was nervous and had to wear one. Why had he bothered today? Mel used to love it, that's why. Mel was dead. Can we begin? The lawyer, a Mr. Smartwood. Brock had never dealt with the man except when the divorce papers had been tossed at him by an annoyed sheriff's office serving them. Smartwood was just a name on the legal document. It hadn't surprised Brock his husband had hired a lawyer unknown to Brock, figuring he'd use his pull to make him quit or there'd be a conflict of interest. Mel had been right. I'm waiting for you, Brock said defensively. Brock, please, Gloria said, but she wasn't looking at him. She hadn't looked in Brock's direction since they'd walked into the lawyer's office together and sat down inches apart. Does she have to be here? Brock made it a point to glare at Gloria. He'd known her for nearly 30 years, since grade school, and he knew what buttons worked best when pushed. Staring and leaning close always rattled her chains. Mr. Silverstein's will is very specific. Only the 2 of you are to be here for the reading, and only if both are here at the same time, so there is no conflict, the lawyer said. Us being in the room at the same time, in the same room is the conflict, right, Gloria? I'm sorry you took what I did so personally, Gloria said. She had her arms crossed but refused to look at Brock. It was completely personal. You took the side of someone you've known less than 10 years. I remember sharing jelly sandwiches in 2nd grade together. How quickly you forget who got you into this business when a wad of cash gets waved in your face. Brock felt his anger rising. He needed to get out of the cramped office and find the nearest bar. He wanted to be a cliche for a few hours, down a bottle of bourbon and an audience of a young and impressionable wannabe directors, wow them with his lies and bullshit, mixing in a few actual things they could use in their sorry careers. I'm going to ask you both to remain silent so I can read this document and then you can leave, Smartwood said. He didn't look too happy, which made Brock happy. Brock knew he was being an asshole to this lawyer, who would have been standing next to Mel in a court of law fighting against him to hurry a divorce before it hit the media. Now everyone knew about the impending divorce and the death of Mel, under mysterious circumstances. It didn't matter that Brock had nothing to do with any of it. All that mattered was he'd lost the man he loved and hated the most. He'd never work in this fucking town again, even if the cops took out full-page ads in every trade paper declaring him innocent. Brock put up his hands and smiled. Sorry, just having a bad day. Please, continue. Mr. Smartwood ruffled the papers in his hands and sighed before resuming. Because the will itself is being held up due to extenuating circumstances, the actual will is still sealed. However, there was one piece of business Mr. Silverstein wanted me to take care of quickly and discreetly. Brock knew because of the way his husband had died, all eyes were on him. He knew the payout for the life insurance was over $2 million, and that didn't include the assets like the safety deposit box, the art collection, or rights to his lucrative realty. If it's ruled a suicide, I'll probably get none of the insurance. If it is ruled murder, I may go up for it. What else was there to talk about right now? It would all be tied up in courts for several years. Eventually, Brock would be found not guilty because he hadn't done anything wrong, and he'd receive the money coming to him. Brock didn't need any of it. He had amassed a small fortune selling assets in the last few months, knowing the lawyers were going to take half of his money. There is a large property Mel gave specific instructions about. Both of you are in charge of the property with several conditions, Smartwood said. I'm all ears, Brock said. Can you stop being a jerk? Gloria asked. Brock shrugged. Gloria had pushed one of his buttons. It worked both ways. Calling him a jerk was always got his blood boiling because his damn father would ask that all the time when he was a kid. When he'd finally come out and told his mother he was gay, who in turn told his father despite the protests, calling Brock a jerk became calling him pillow biter or whatever defamatory name his simple father could think of at the moment. You're not listening, Gloria said to Brock with an edge to her voice. She was looking at him now. Brock knew she'd realized what she'd said and how hurtful it was. The wound still raw after all these years. She didn't play fair, but neither did Brock. He smiled, trying to be nice. I'm sorry, I went somewhere like I do sometimes. Went somewhere? Smartwood asked. His mind drifts. Creative types do that. Mel and Brock could be sitting in a room together for 5 straight hours, both drifting in and out of their heads and all alone. It was fun to watch at times, but when neither wanted to come out of it, I canceled many meetings over the years because of it, Gloria said. Smartwood said, yes, well, at any rate, you chose Mel over me, Brock said suddenly. He didn't want to get into this, especially in front of the lawyer, but it slipped out. I chose sanity over watching you slowly kill yourself. Gloria was back to looking away. I couldn't go through something like that with you again. You promised me as your friend you'd never get that low. I feared you'd do it again. It had been sleeping pills and vodka. He'd survived and heard his father's taunts in his head. You even try to kill yourself like a fucking woman. Smartwood cleared his throat. I think you need water, Brock said, and caught Gloria smiling. Here is the deed to the property in Vermont. It is now in both of your names. It cannot be sold. It cannot be visited. It is strictly off limits to either of you. Is this understood? No, both said at the same time. Then I am instructed to keep the deed. Smartwood slid the paper back towards him. Not so fast. Gloria scooped it up and looked at it, frowning. The address is crossed out. Is this even legal? I have the original secured in my possession as Mr. Silverstein instructed me. He fought me long and hard on even giving you this redacted copy. Trust me, he wants you to have nothing to do with it. According to the short conversations we had about this during the initial divorce conversations, he never wanted you to know about it unless he died, even under less than normal circumstances. Frankly, just letting you know about it had Melvin sweating, but he knew it was the right thing to do. Now it won't become common knowledge, and it can be swept under the rug, so to speak, Smartwood said. None of that makes sense, Gloria said. I don't understand. What are you telling us? Vermont is lovely this time of year, Brock said. Smartwood smiled unpleasantly. You're not to know where the property is, not yet. You just challenged someone who can be a real asshole when he's challenged, Gloria said. Exactly. Brock didn't bother shaking Smartwood's hand before he left the small office. All right. On the preview with Amazon, you can read chapter 2 and 3 and a little bit of 4 as well. Some good stuff happens in there, so I'll leave that for others to decide if they want to read. For 99 cents, you can get the whole book right now, discounted through Cyber Monday, which is November 30th, 2020. If you happen to be watching this video after November of 2020 and the book is back to full price, well, don't despair. It's still worth that price, and you are more than welcome to pay us full price, and we'd appreciate the support. And of course, if you're more of a paperback reader like me, go ahead and spend the $16.99 and get the paperback and enjoy that. We think we put this down to 99 cents because we believe after you read it, you'd really enjoy seeing some of our other books that we've done together. So thank you for watching, everyone, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.